Eyes of Minnesota sports flowing in their veins. Mackey and Judd on Score North and ScoreNorth.com.
Give me Kirk Cousins right now in Indianapolis. Now, that is not something I thought I would ever say. It's not something I thought anybody would think that they would hear me say. But we need, with the talent we have, just a game manager. And ultimately, I think that is why Jim Irsay and the brass decided to move on. We don't need a quarterback that's going to be sporadic. We don't need a quarterback that's going to try to die on every single play. We need a quarterback that is going to get us in a good position, especially with the amount of money we have to bring in a great left tackle next to Quentin Nelson, like Armstead, who's up right there, with Jonathan Taylor in the back. Bring on a weapon. Hey, Mark Cooper. Come on, Indianapolis.
That's what I said on Purple Daily yesterday. That you always talk about teams hire the opposite coach of what they just fired, and I think they do that with quarterbacks sometimes too. Indianapolis is coming off this spastic, game train wrecking Carson Wentz, just blindfolded in his own end zone, throwing a pass to a safety for a pick six. They just want some stability. That's all they want. That's what McAfee's saying.
Oh, and Kirk's the guy for them then. Like, you want stability? Let me sell you on stability.
Mr. Stability.
This man will bring you stability on and off the field like you wouldn't believe.
All right, this is Mackey and Judd. Every Friday we open up the mailbag, so to speak. It's Feedback Friday. You can always hit us up. You can hit. Our DMs are open on Twitter except for Judd's. You can hit us up through the Score North app. There's a feedback tab.
If we don't follow each other, just communicate through the normal means of Twitter, okay? Do not DM me.
Let's start with a lot of Kirk Cousins stuff early here, and then later on we'll get to some other non-Kirk Cousins stuff here. But let's start with Eugene Lavro via the Score North app. He says, package Adam Thielen and Kirk Cousins to a team for multiple draft picks.
Wow, dude.
So I'm going to give him this. One. Yep.
I love that.
But here's the crazy thing about this. This may seem like Eugene is, maybe Eugene got a couple Surleys in him last night and started recklessly speculating.
You wouldn't be the only one.
But the Indianapolis Colts have plenty of cap space to do this exact thing. And they have the exact two needs on offense that you would be looking for to package these two guys together. They need a good starting quarterback, and they need a weapon at wide receiver. They've got the offensive line covered. They've got Jonathan Taylor. They've got a defense. And they've got $70 million in cap space for 2022. Mm-hmm. So this may seem like a wild, harebrained idea from Eugene on the Score North app, but it actually, the Colts would probably sign up for this if the Now, they don't have a first-round pick this year, so I don't know what that package would look like, but what do you think?
I actually like it a lot. If it involves the Colts 2023 first-round pick and, let's say, a third-round pick that could turn, if the Colts make the playoffs or win a playoff game, turns into a second-round pick or perhaps a first-round pick in, 2024 or something. Yeah. Yes, I am open right now to all ideas. And I think you're crazy if you're not. Why not? The Colts are, to go back to the conversation that we had on Thursday's show, aren't the Colts in a very similar position to where the Vikings were in 2018 when they got Kirk? So, yes, let's push them, give them a shove, go for it, guys, and we're going to help you. But what you're going to do is help us for the future. You're in a different conference, so it's not, if it comes back to bite you, it's not going to be terrible. Yeah, I think the greatest reckless speculation is both reckless and in some ways responsible. And I think that is reckless and responsible speculation. Eugene, good work.
What would it take? So I went to IndyStar.com and they threw the paywall on me, but they don't have a first round pick.
Through the paywall,
they've got a.
Son of a. You know what?
The paywall pop up came up.
I hate
but you know how it shades out but you can still kind of see the article.
And if you can stop your browser before the thing comes up, you can sometimes get around it. Oh yeah, I've done it off the start.
I didn't know that.
Times.
You just hit the X while it's loading.
Yep. You gotta be really quick though. You gotta be really quick. Yeah.
Let me
Thanks,
try that.
Brian Baldinger.
You're welcome.
So they've got a second-round pick and 2 third-round picks this year, but then they have a first-round pick and a very quarterback-heavy draft next year.
Correct.
So just to entertain this for a second, all right, let's say we're going to make a blockbuster proposal here on behalf of Kwesi to the Colts. You guys need a quarterback. You guys need a wide receiver. You can have both. But you're going to have to give up your second and 2/3 this year and a first-round pick next year. Who says no?
Oh, I think the Colts do. I think that's too much. So wait, I'm sorry. So the Colts second,
keep a third.
Both third. Okay, so keep a third.
Second, a third this year, and then a first round, probably late first round.
I think we're getting warmer. I think we're getting warmer.
And we'll kick a fourth or a fifth back your way.
Kick that fourth or fifth
bing,
back,
bing, bing,
baby.
bing, 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 bing,
Kick
bing,
the
bing,
can.
bing, 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 bing. We have a deal. The Judd trade tracker approves of that trade. Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna float this. I'm gonna ask you guys the next question, and then I'm gonna tweet this out and just see what people think.
It'll never happen, Mackey.
Carl Melkvist via the Score North app says, big fan of the show. I've been watching you guys this season. I'm watching your current coverage of Kirk and free agency. One question struck me. Isn't it odd that Kirk Cousins' self-confidence in contract negotiations is exactly what you would want in game time? But when it comes to the game, his self-confidence is non-existent. He tells us he wants to be a Viking going forward, but that's not reflected in his unwillingness to take a pay cut.
Yeah, look, Carl, we are all good at certain things in life, and Kirk is a master negotiator. He's fantastic, but yeah, he is clearly in a suit and tie. This man is cool, calm, collected, and calculated. And you put a helmet and shoulder pads on Kirk, and it's great until the pressure starts, and then it obviously goes to hell. So yes, it's an interesting dynamic, and I know exactly what Carl is saying, and I don't disagree, but I do think that certain people are really good at certain things, and the Kirk camp, so it's not just Kirk, the Kirk camp is fantastic at deciding that they are going to, and we're going to maximize his value at every turn, and that's where they put their premium on. But yes, it is a little bit odd that a guy who seemingly gets paid like a superstar and has the wherewithal to go into negotiations prepared to be asked for that payday gets into like the most important games, and it's like, oh, I don't know exactly here.
And I don't know how much is it. I mean, I know Kirk plays a humongous factor, so I'm not trying to say like I don't know. But does he have like Ari Gold as his agent? Like who the hell? How good is his agent at this?
Mike McCartney, who is a longtime agent, whose dad is the former Colorado Buffaloes coach Bill, who was, I believe, the founder of the Promise Keepers. That's who his guy is.
What is that?
The Promise Keepers was a group of a Christian group, I believe it was, of men who would get together and talk about being faithful to their families and their wives and blah blah blah.
They have to they can't just be faithful. Like they have to
it was like a brotherhood.
Marriage.
It was like a brotherhood. I don't think it was like a church, but I think it was a faith-based group. And if I'm not mistaken, they once had, in my early days at the Star Tribune, an event at the Metrodome that was like an overflow, huge crowd. So they did well. But, here's the thing about Kirk that I will say where his contractual negotiations have gone, where you could tell that he definitely plays a big role. Go back to that documentary when he was a free agent in 2018, when they followed basically Kirk and his family around as the negotiations were going down. And I always go back to how he basically said on camera, okay, now we got the Vikings, like the Jets are here, and now we got the Vikings where we want them to. Like, that's pretty damn calculated.
It is.
I don't blame him,
but that's how, I mean, in fairness, that's how pretty much all, I'm assuming, negotiations go. They're just not filmed and documented and put out. They also had a chance, I'm sure, to edit that out and just not show that part of it, and they chose to keep it in. So.
But I also found it intriguing based on Dex's point, which is like, how involved is Kirk here? Like, I think Kirk is involved very much. I think there are some guys who get their payday and the agent basically just calls and says, okay, guy, it's done. So it's an interesting question.
All right, I tweeted it. Here's what I tweeted. I woke up feeling reckless this morning. Colts need a quarterback and a weapon, and they have like $70 million in cap space. So who says no? Colts receive Kirk Cousins, Adam Thielen. Vikings receive second and third round picks this year and a first round pick next year.
I'm going to respond right now.
Can you retweet respond so we can just get more conversation going here? Okay.
No. I'm going to tweet Score North at it again. The Cousins nonsense never stops.
Yes.
Why don't you guys talk about the backup cornerbacks?
We're very excited to do those episodes in early July. It'll be great.
Reckless speculation.
Trust me, we will be fishing for backup cornerback discussion on July 7th. It'll be great. All right, Suvi George via the Score North app says, on the Rich Eisen show, in his interview with Rick Spielman, we have a clip of this somewhere, but it's like 5 minutes of Spielman rambling. Yeah. There is no there's no smoking gun thing.
Seconds.
There's no nut graph, as we used to say in the newspaper business.
So basically, on the Rich Eisen show, Rick Spielman's been doing media stuff, and he's been pretty good. But Rich Eisen asked him two very pointed questions about Kirk Cousins. Can Kirk Cousins win a Super Bowl with the Minnesota Vikings? And if you could go back in time, would you still do that same contract for Kirk Cousins? Those are yes or no questions. Can you win a Super Bowl? Yes or no, right? Would you have done the contract the same if you go back in time? He literally rambled for 10 minutes. Not that long, but he didn't give an answer.
Yes.
Which is interesting. So the question from Suvi is, do you think that that's a damning indictment from Spielman to Kirk Cousins? Or do you think he just doesn't like to answer questions?
I'll actually take door two. He doesn't answer questions. And he definitely is not. He doesn't answer questions for moves for which he's responsible that didn't go as planned.
Yeah.
So if Rick Spielman had come out and said, Rich, I signed the guy in 2018, and let me tell you right now, he is a loser, capital L, I would have been far more shocked. The response that we got to me is, whether he's employed by the Vikings or not, was completely expected. And Rick is never going to indict himself too, because Rick still wants a job back in the league, right? So if Rick says, yeah, I screwed that up, Rich. Yeah. So no, I'm not surprised one bit. And in fact, would have been much more shocked if Rick had come clean and said, oh boy, that guy.
I'll answer, I guess, this question from Suvi this way. If this were Russell Wilson, and it were a former general manager of the Seattle Seahawks commenting on Russell Wilson, and someone said, do you think Russell Wilson can win a Super Bowl? The answer is yes. Right? Because he's won one before. But maybe I should pick a quarterback that hasn't won one. Do you think that Dak Prescott can win a Super Bowl? Or do you think that,
Justin Herbert?
Yes. Yes, I think he can. Joe Burrow, yes, I think he can. And with Kirk, the answer from even his own general manager that signed him is, I'm going to tap dance for 2 minutes.
I don't really know.
It's interesting. KM on Twitter says, PA is in fine form today. It's from earlier this week. He said Cousins is a top 10 quarterback because we don't have enough sample size on Justin Herbert yet. And he's I had 3 people send me this a couple days ago.
Okay.
And he's defending Kirk's salary because he gives a lot of it to charity. It would be great if you could subvert the cap. If you could take a $45 million cap hit down to 37 by just giving $8 million to charity. Wouldn't that be great?
The charity thing
we
is
get a right guard. We just need to donate to charity. We can get Oli Udoh out of the starting right guard slot.
Let's just say the Cousins' estate must have tax write-offs that are incredible. Because if you donate that much to charity, guess what you don't have to do? You don't have to pay taxes on it.
I think he donates to charity out of the goodness of his heart.
I'm just saying it's a good way to keep the books clean, okay? I do not myself donate much. So I'll take stuff to Goodwill.
We know.
Dawn will.
Yeah, we know.
Dawn will. But
so you took some of those gray and white used socks to Goodwill, and you feel
my
good
fat
about
clothes.
your
I took all my fat clothes. I'm like, yeah, take my fat clothes. If some guy
That's
comes
confident.
in,
Confidence is getting rid of the fat clothes.
Yeah. But I mean, that's next. That's next because I'm keeping the weight off. Damn it.
Oh, man. F. Whipple on YouTube. All right, this is some criticism here. Strap in. While I understand the dislike of Cousins due to his contract, which definitely needs to be redone for less money, I'm over these guys and their Kirk derangement syndrome. They spend little to no time identifying the positives of Cousins' play over the past few years. Look, if Cousins doesn't redo the contract in a way that's beneficial for the entire team, then he should be traded. By the way, there is some buzz that that's exactly what's happening right now. These guys need to find something else to gripe about besides Cousins. And then all my homies hate the CCP chimes in on Twitter with a similar sentiment. He says, Phil, here's some feedback from a 5-year listener. Hear me out. I just want to say that I unsubscribed from your podcast today. All you do is trash talk Cousins. It's very dramatic and irrational. I have no problem pointing out Kirk's imperfections, but it's all you guys do. You're way too harsh on him. I stuck around as long as I could. Thanks for the good times. The show just doesn't make sense to me anymore. Thoughts?
Okay, so disagreeing with what we say about Kirk is, yeah, that's cool. That's fine. I think I'm more perplexed by the people that don't understand, though, that he is the quarterback of the most popular team, and it's not even close, in this town. His tenure here is in question. Not saying he's gone, not saying he stays. There seems to be this notion that we shouldn't be talking about him, despite the fact that things are fluid on a daily basis. Now, the comeback to that is, well, that's fine, but have different takes. Okay, the problem there is this. My opinion is not going to change. And so like when we're talking about one day it's, are they going to keep Kirk? And then there's a report that the Colts have called. We can't ignore that. So like, that's not you know what? We talked about Kirk on Monday. So just because we've got new information, let's ignore it. That's not how this works. So, and I'm not going to turn my opinion and say, you know what, today I'm arguing to keep Kirk. Tomorrow I'll be trade Kirk guy. There are people who do that. I'm not going to. So I guess I don't know what people want, because it would be wildly inappropriate. And I think that the pushback from the majority of people who watch and consume the show would be far more negative if we, for instance, spent today's show talking about backup right guards.
Oh my God, yes.
So like I get the frustration, but the Kirk Cousins, this entire roster is as fluid as it's been in years. Like there's question marks about almost, aside from Justin Jefferson, right?
Yeah.
So like I don't understand the people that think that we can just ignore the quarterback who there is news about that we aren't generating necessarily, really on a daily basis.
Here's my compromise for both F. Whipple and all my homies hate the CCP, okay? And especially like all my homies hate the CCP. So you've been a 5-year listener and you've enjoyed a lot of the non-Kirk. You disagree strongly on Kirk Cousins, and we should almost have like a daily plan, it's like membership plans, right? Like a daily plan if you're a daily listener, but maybe if you disagree strongly with Kirk Cousins, you're on the weekly plan. You come in once a week, and that way you don't have to hear it 4 days a week. And like Judd said, there's new news every day. I mean, last night, Judd and I were kicking it around with some people behind the scenes, and there's negotiations happening with Kirk Cousins right now, it sounds like. If Kirk does indeed turn down the Vikings' latest, I would call it team-friendly overture, like there's things happening every day here. There's teams calling the Vikings. The Colts need a quarterback. So I don't know if it's triggering to hear talk about Kirk Cousins' deficiencies and the fact that he might be gone, maybe the weekly plan is the right way to go. Until this whole thing resolves itself.
Exactly right. And like eventually this will get done, and then Kirk won't be the focus of our daily topics and conversations. But until then, I don't know what to tell you. Yeah,
it's literally the most important sports figure in the Twin Cities right now.
Like, and we would lose
to Karl Anthony Towns
and we would lose more audience and respect if we just said, screw it. Let's talk about something else. Like that.
Yeah, and by the way, like if you want
a lot of people frustrated by that.
If you're looking for Minnesota sports media options that ignore this interesting discussion, you can find those too.
Well, right.
They exist.
Yeah.
That's not us.
Ryan Sherry via the Score North app says, it amazes me that Cousins and other NFL quarterbacks who have made over $100 million in their career playing football are not willing to take less money. to help add offensive linemen and other players so they can one day play with their grandkids. He's saying, like, if you don't have good offensive linemen, you might not be able to see your grandkids because you're going to get smoked. Yeah, to me, it's more about, like, do you want to win a Super Bowl, and what's your legacy? You know, what's your ultimate goal? Is it to be a mercenary and just make as much money as possible, or could you maybe kick $7 or $8 million back so that you can get a right guard that knows what he's doing, or a center that knows what he's doing, and have a better chance to win football games? And I can see early in your career, especially when you're a third or fourth round draft pick and you didn't get that big multi-million-dollar first contract, signing bonus, etc. When I don't blame him at all coming out of that Washington fiasco for trying to get his, right? All right, this is a train wreck franchise. I'm going to get mine, and I'm going to sign that contract with the Vikings, all right? Once you get to the $120, $130 million career earnings mark and you're 30 years old, personally, if it were me, my attention would shift. And again, no one's saying that you shouldn't still make a ton of money. But if you really want to win a Super Bowl, you probably can't be strong-arming every single negotiation. It's going to be really tough.
Put it perfectly. Absolutely.
Thank you.
No, seriously. I got nothing on that to add. You put it perfectly.
Wow, amazing. I'm having a great show so far.
You are. You're throwing fastballs.
Corey J. Baker via Twitter says, love all the content you guys put out. I'm certainly not a Cousins crusader, but if the Wilfs want to contend for championships every year, who would you suggest is out there if we trade Kirk Cousins?
Okay, I'm going to go back to what, and this is not condescending, Judd. I'm going to go back to what I've been saying, though, and I believe this right now. Until Kwesi and KOC prove that they cannot find a quarterback, I don't think it's up to us to say, go get this guy. They need to, in my opinion, only the opinion of Judd Zolgad, they need to identify a quarterback. I would like them to draft one to have my long explained rationale of team control, right? But this is why I said, if they think that the quarterback is in the 2022 class, which a lot of people don't, that's awesome. If they're like, you know what, that class not that great. Like, we talked it up a little bit, but we really don't like it that much. 2023, that's our class. But yeah, there's this weird amongst some, there's this weird dynamic of the Cousins discussion of, well, if you're going to get rid of Kirk, who are you going to get? The point is, the Wilfs hired people who are supposed to be able to identify quarterback play because the previous guys couldn't. So I don't think it's on me to come in and say, hey, O'Connell, come here. What's up, Judd? I'm going to tell you what you should do at QB. So I'm being serious here. I think that question needs to be left to the people that you just hired because the previous guys couldn't answer it themselves.
Yeah, I'll add this and say that I don't think the goal should be, if they move on from Cousins, it shouldn't just be, well, if you're going to move on from Cousins, and you immediately have to find someone who steps in on day one and is better than Cousins.
Sure.
It might be that you draft someone that isn't as good at age 22 as Cousins at age 34, but if you give him 2 or 3 years, he becomes a top 6 guy and a guy that can lead your franchise, et cetera, et cetera. But to me, the funny part about this question, not to rag on Corey here, is this is more of like me targeting the Wilfs. The Wilfs want to be contenders every year, and so if you're going to move on from Cousins, how are you going to be? Well, you're not anywhere near contending right now.
Right.
And quite frankly, you haven't been since Cousins signed. The closest you've been to contending was the 1 year you made the playoffs in the last 4, and you got smoked in the second round of the playoffs.
The first 2 years you should have been. Like 18 was a disaster.
Yeah.
20 and 21, yeah. Your roster disintegrated.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
Josh Winger via the Score North app says, with all the NFL quarterback news going around, isn't it weird that some teams like the Panthers are more willing to take a shot at Deshaun Watson, according to reports, than go for Kirk? If you're the Vikings, is the lack of interest around Kirk alarming? I'm going to guess it's probably not alarming to Kwesi and KOC. I think those guys are probably very familiar with the quarterback landscape. They know what Kirk's deficiencies are. They know what the contract situation is. I think all of those things, like if there wasn't this albatross contract around his neck right now, a self-imposed albatross that leads him into free agency in a year from now, there would be more interest in him. I think some of it is, teams know his on the field deficiencies and they know that he's not the best at like leading and connecting with teammates. But that contract is probably preventing interest in him. Carson Wentz's contract, bad. I don't think it's as much of an albatross as Cousins.
Well, so this is also an interesting question to dissect from this angle as well, Phil. I don't think there's necessarily a lack of interest in the phone is not ringing for the Vikings. Like I'm standing by the fact that the Carolina Panthers put in an exploratory call. I never said it was close. I said they called, and we have definitely heard that more teams have called. Mm-hmm. So like, I think you have to parse the words of that question apart. I think there is interest from other teams in Cousins. The asking price and the contract cause problems. But I don't think it's Houston's phone on Watson is ringing off the hook, right? And Seattle's phone was ringing. And the Vikings, it's like, why is the phone not ringing for us? I don't think it's that. I think teams are calling on Kirk. I do think that there's problems there once the conversations start. But it's not like the rest of the league thinks Kirk sucks.
Yeah.
And are like, we're out on Kirk. We're not going to call. The Vikings are getting calls. The question is, are they going to go somewhere or not?
It's shades of gray, right? I mean, part of the problem is, he's going to cost $35 million unless there's a restructuring or the Vikings eat some of it for any team that acquires him. And the teams that would call would have to do finagling, except for the Colts. The Colts would not have to do finagling. They could literally trade for him as a one-year mercenary, just like they did with Phillip Rivers. That was a signing, I believe.
Yeah.
And just like they did with Carson Wentz.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see here. We got one more Kirk question here for now. Christian says via the Score North app, this is purely speculative, but as the trade market for quarterbacks continues to dry up, could the Vikings eventually use this to their advantage in contract extension talks with Kirk? Or will there most likely be a team willing to spend $45 million plus on Cousins next offseason?
Reckless speculation.
Okay, so I think with an ordinary player and agent, that's a great point. Like, I think the question is on point completely. Kirk Cousins and his camp are not ordinary. As far as I can tell right now, unless you are going to break the bank, they are dead set on him this time, much like he did in March of 2018, hitting the free agent market, right? There's been nothing so far, Phil, to indicate to us that's not the case.
Yeah.
So the question makes sense for, let's say, 95% of players in the National Football League.
Yeah.
The 5% that say, hold on a second here, Kirk's in that. So no, I don't think how things are playing out actually facilitate an extension, despite the fact that there is probably a really coherent case to be made that they should and could.
I think if you're Kirk in his camp right now, I mean, first of all, you have so much leverage. I think you're pretty content with a couple different scenarios here. First of all, there's no way he's going to sign a team-friendly contract at this point with the Vikings.
No.
I think it would have happened by now.
No, you are correct.
So he's only going to sign an extension with the Vikings or whoever they might look to trade him to. Mm-hmm. If it blows them away, right? If it's like $45 million a year, if it's Pat Mahomes' average annual value, the cap is going up the next couple years. So in the absence of that, I think the Cousins camp would happily sit there and cross their arms and say, yeah, let's just play the contract that we agreed to. Give me my money in 2022, and then everybody, including the Vikings, can enter a market bidding war for my services going into next offseason, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of this question is, could there be a reality check at some point that, hey, the musical chairs game might stop and there might not be options out there? There's always going to be desperate teams, and the supply and the demand has not been equal really in our lives. There's going to be any given off season 5 to 10 teams that are looking to upgrade, that think they can fix somebody.
Yep.
So he's in a great spot, man. Like he's he's going to get paid one way or another, unless the only way he doesn't get paid is if he bets on himself, doesn't sign an extension, plays out the last year of his contract and gets hurt or something.
Yes.
Or the Vikings roster around him is stripped down so badly that he has the worst year of his career. I mean, even then he's going to make $20 million a year more. Like
he'd still get paid. The only thing is that they are banking on the fact that his history does tell us he does not get hurt.
Yeah, but that doesn't necessarily in this sport. I don't think it means that he's like one hit is all it takes in this sport.
I agree with you. I'm saying his camp is banking on that. I am not saying, just to be very clear here, I am not saying, and this is condescending, Judd, we're not dealing with a logical person here. Like this is not there isn't.
I think we're dealing with a very logical, like almost too logical of a person.
He's too greedy. He's a greedy person. But logic would say somebody should get to Kirk and say, Phil, exactly what you just said, which is, dude, you're in your 30s. Like great career, great games played, impressive. That's awesome. But it's not the norm. It takes one hit, Kirk.
You know what? There's another thing here.
I would sit down with Kirk and say, get the Vikings' best offer and sign it.
What I'm about to say, I have no inside information on. It's my own feeling and thought. I think he's the type of guy that just wants his agent to handle all of those conversations. Like a lot of players are like that. Like that there's probably not, when he talks to KOC or when he talks to Kwesi, it's probably only football related and probably has nothing to do with how they should build the rest of the team. Like Rodgers, almost to a fault, wants input on who the third wide receiver should be, right? I don't think Cousins wants any of that smoke. I think he wants to sort of hide behind, hey, listen, let's just leave the contractual stuff to my agent, where meanwhile he's telling his agent behind the scenes.
Oh, yeah, he's very involved.
Jack it up.
Behind the scenes,
but to the public, he's saying,
yeah,
I want to be a Viking for life. I don't concern myself with the rest of this stuff. I just leave that up to the front office and God's will and whatever. But like, you can't say that you want to be a Viking for life. And then when the Vikings approach you and say, all right, let's talk contract extension. We're still going to pay you, but like, we got to make this thing. We got to build this roster. This thing, the offensive line, as you want to
win?
It's kind of.
Do you want to win?
And that's kind of the story, right? Like, you can be a Viking for life, but you can't be a Viking for life taking up that big a percentage of the cap if your goal is to win a Super Bowl as a Viking for life.
But if you're a mercenary, and he came here as such, right? Like there was no, and that's fine. But I mean, he signed in March of 2018 to come in and be the final piece. And he got a huge contract, the first at the time fully guaranteed contract in the history of the league, okay? I don't think that you become Mr. Pick Your Team, in this case, Viking for life, being that guy. Like you came here as basically a football assassin, a hitman. Your hit was to win a Super Bowl. You whiffed. You didn't get it. I don't see that guy then saying, I found out I love this team. This is my team from now on. You just sort of move on.
Yeah. No.
That's your life. That's fine. I got no problem with that.
Yeah, no, that's fair.